Hi, I'm Sky High Phoenix, a game developer and student at the University of Portsmouth studying for a specialism in game design, and this is another entry into my game development diary. More specifically, this is the entry which is acting as a post-mortem for Game Jam 2 for the game development module that I'm taking. Now, similar to the previous Game Jam that I did a post-mortem for, we're going to start off looking at the brief. I mean, again, how are you meant to know what's going on if I don't tell you what we were meant to do? This time, it's 3 weeks instead of 2, and we get a team of 4, and in this case they just buddied up pairs, and we got to make a shoot 'em up. Very different from the initial brief in terms of style and the fact that you can actually get far more done with 4 people than you'd expect with 2 people, because you also now have in the teams, or at least I had, a coder, an artist, and 2 designers, including myself. Whereas on the first Game Jam, it was just me as a designer and an artist. So this time, hopes are a bit higher to get something in, or something better in than just some code. But ultimately, it's hopes at this stage. As I mentioned with the last Game Jam, expectations should probably be lowered for what happens. Was that fully implemented? Possibly not, but we'll see how that goes. So again, knowing that, we came up with some ideas. Again, ideation, start of the process. You need to know what you're dealing with, particularly when you're sitting down for essentially one team meeting at the start of the project so people know what to do over what would be 2 weeks, because there was also a consolidation week in the middle. So again, very much pencil to paper, pen to paper. We came up first with a list of what we need to code and what we want in terms of assets based on some of the stuff that we've ideated about over there. Namely, we took shoot 'em up and decided, what if we did a PvE hide and seek but with guns? It's an idea. Is it a great idea in retrospect? It could be better. But again, this is the second game that we have to make as students on this course. So it's a situation where you don't necessarily expect the ideas to be the best at this point. You can also see on this that we have some ideas of the kind of scenery or scene we want. Namely, we've got a lake, and we've got a cabin hut. We're in the woods. We've got a couple of key structures, for example, possibly a cave, big rock in the middle, and the idea is generate some terrain around those key areas and generate some enemies and have multiple rounds to where you go out, limited ammunition, limited time, go get all the enemies. Seems a simple enough concept when you break it down like that, namely, just hunt the enemies in world that generates each level. Yeah, so this time I'm again responsible for a lot of coding that, so when you have to actually nail down a lot of that logic, sometimes you need to figure out some of the complexities. But you'll also notice I've added the fact that I've done a touch of art in there, and I do mean a touch. Again, we're back to good old reliable VS Code, and we got some more C++. And as you can see, a lot of logic. For example, top row there is a lot of just setting up, okay, this is how we're going to hold our data, this is what we're dealing with in terms of categorizing it and making sure that it works. Whereas further down into more this section, we're getting into situations where we're dealing more with, okay, how do we deal with generating the locations for each? How do we deal with to make sure that we're generating enough of the different types of obstacles? And that is different types of obstacles, because you'll be generating rocks, you'll be generating trees, you might even be generating some stalagmites if they generate in zone 6, which we have here, which would be the cave. And there's some other underlying logic here, or design, that is, okay, let's generate it by zone. So we got a map, let's split it into more manageable chunks, let's generate stuff in there, and make sure that it also means that there's some relatively even distribution, so you can actually go and explore the whole map and have a chance of getting all the enemies. Slight problem. This, if you remember, if you've watched the previous video, is where I found out that the C++ that as I was coding it is not compatible with Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, that was not fun to find out, considering I'd already put a good amount of time into this project when I figured that out, and it's annoying. But what are you going to do? You're going to start over again and convert it to blueprints. Yeah. Somehow, this seemed more effective than fixing the C++. Probably because the other coder that I had had mainly been working on a blueprints system and wasn't as comfortable coding C++. So, in that sense, there was a possibility to hook in something more directly into that code, and also, if your other coder prefers that, means that they can go in and read things more easily, hopefully. And also, if you're going to start over again, you might as well start over in a way where a lot of the stuff is done for you, rather than having to learn how to code it specifically in the time frame, particularly given that this was about a week and a half into the 3-week project. Yeah, not optimal, but can be done. So, as you'll notice here, ended up making a bunch of different blueprints and assets. So you've got the things from your enemies to your different types of obstacles, for example, the rocks, the trees, and then you've got some other things such as the cabin and the cave, where you've got staples of the different of the map. And you'll also notice this is the touch of art that I was mentioning. It's meant to be a UI where you display some things like your statistics for your ammo, your enemies, your time, and then some information about the round to come. The astute of you have noticed that I have only just shown you the file search and not the actual files. Yeah, this. And what makes it worse is that. Yes, our source control failed 28 hours beforehand. We hadn't set up the git ignore properly. When this was figured out, it definitely caused quite a bit of panic within the team, and of course, who would it fall to try and sort this out but myself. Just happens to be that I was the one who was available at that time to try and sort it out, with enough technical knowledge to try and sort it out. Okay, so source control has failed. I've now got to try and get as much of the 3D model assets and the code back as I can, whilst also trying not to lose too much sleep, because it is, again, not directly assessed, but something that I want to hand in something decent. Again, the solution, salvage what you can to this situation. In the end, as you can see, these are the things that I managed to get out of it. Now, you would have hoped that because of GitHub you could just roll back and deal with and just get the earlier version of the files. Annoyingly, because of the git ignore, it seems that every time we run these and then try putting roll back, something had messed up. Something had probably corrupted in one of the asset files. So, admittedly, the fact that I even got this much back, the 3D models here, and then of course all the actual bits of code in the blueprints, this is a situation where it was good enough for what I could do for the time, which was salvage most of the code. And even though I tried putting it back into the engine and running again, that was where we found out you could only really run it once the program was opened once. Every time you close the program, something just went wrong. Again, I have to assume something is corrupted with one of the asset files, and I think it was in the first person element, which was not great, because ultimately that's some of the stuff that you have baked into the Unreal Engine 5 if you go into the first person setup. And then when you modify that, if something's gone wrong, it's just going to keep going wrong in this case. But with the time that we had left, I couldn't figure out what was going wrong, and this is in the end what we had. Again, there's code behind this. Haven't run it in engine for this video because I just don't want to bother with that nightmare again. Hopefully you'll forgive me for that one. Now again, if we're talking this, there's been some element of merging work. Yes, we source controlled this time. However, when you have a source control, you kind of hope that people push to it. Yeah, no one else in the group had anything by the start of the third week of the project, which was annoying considering I had most of my code and had started converting it to blueprints at that point. Fortunately though, the other designer on the team had enough time that they were able to provide the 3D assets that you may have noted that I showed that were salvaged, and the coder managed to get me some stuff. Not much, admittedly, but a couple things done with the actual objects that I'm interfacing with about 48 hours before the deadline. It was good enough that I could hook it into my code, but it wasn't much. It was still very lackluster, so a lot of what we had for the hand-in was just the generation, the item generation, because there wasn't really anything else to go with it. Again, this leads back to people skills. If you're working in a team and that team isn't working, to just use the teamwork. Let's try that again. If you're working in a team but the team isn't working, there's something that you have to be able to do about it. And it's in that soft skills environment. In my case, again, it's understand this is uni. One of our team members was just a no-show for the entire project. That didn't help, especially since they were the artist, and this is why the other designer had to step in. But again, it's that thing of preparing for that situation where you don't go in with the mindset that everyone's always going to be in the group working on this specific project. This was probably where it started to sink in a bit more, because this was now 2 projects where I've had someone not really participate in it, but ultimately it's just the nature of life. You have to work around it. Again, ensure people are understanding what they are agreeing to do. This was mainly with the coder. When your coder comes to you on the Monday of the 3rd week saying, yeah, I don't really understand what you're saying here, because they were not actually that comfortable coding in its completeness. So, admittedly, in that case, it is that thing of sit down with coder, help them through a lot of it. I mean, I essentially helped in this case by sitting down with them for a couple hours and just teaching them the couple basics that they need to be able to code the thing that they eventually handed to me. Again, it's basic object manipulation at that point, but nothing. That was not something that they had dealt with previously, so getting that couple hours really hopefully helped them, and it did seem to at least. And then again, that plays into the 3rd point on here, which is finding that balance, because for the past 2 projects, a lot of the hand-in was my work. Sometimes that's good because it means that you have a decent hand-in, but it's also a thing of, okay, is that time well spent me doing work, or is that time where I could help coach a couple people to get more work done independently and find that balance there? Ultimately, it's something that needs to be worked on at this stage, but it's something where there is no correct answer in a sense, because every situation will be different. But the people skills for this one, again, a lot of it comes back to the expectation management. Now, admittedly, I had thought I dropped it from the first game jam, but in this case, proved that I need to drop it further. Okay? That's it. There is no other way around it. There are people who will just take to these situations, particularly in the short term, and they will always surprise you in that case. Ultimately, you just work with it, and this is where you learn. And speaking of learning, well, first of all, the hand-in, ultimately, as I say, a lot of it is, again, just the salvage project files, and just handing in what we could salvage from the source control, and again, learning from that. Make sure the source control is set up correctly. And this is one piece of advice that I would have to give to anyone. Make sure your git ignore is set up properly. For us, it nearly lost us everything on the project, and it's something that I recommend avoiding if at all possible. Again, expectations lower while people find their feet. The idea in this case being, okay, second game jam, drop the expectations. Still, the results weren't quite to that expectation, but hopefully by game jam 3, it's a situation where, okay, if I keep expectations the same, we can get to a situation where, okay, starting to meet the pace of the uni in terms of what is expected at any given time. The other thing here was be prepared to rescope further and faster. We didn't rescope once in this project in the end. The only thing we did rescope was, okay, designer goes in and makes 3D models. They don't have to be to the same quality that we'd necessarily expect an artist to work to. In this case, we needed to rescope a lot earlier. That was something we failed to do. And quite frankly, it's something that, having this experience, is very much, okay, this is why. This is now why it needs to be done. This is why it should be done in the future. And knowing, okay, this is the symptom of it. Let's go. And then, of course, again, make sure your source control is set up so you can actually roll back. Again, links to point 1, but I'm repeating it here because if that git ignore is badly done, it can mess with some of the files even if you roll back, because the thing that you've actually done is a couple rollbacks before and you can't actually find what the error is, and it's going to mess up with your code, for example. Annoying, but rather in game jam 2 than in the final project where you're actually getting assessed, or when you're pushing to a live server when you're working. Get that right now and learn from it. It's all that really can be done at this point. Then, of course, that is pretty much it for Game Jam 2. Beyond that, it very much is a situation where it is, again, okay, it's a fast assessment or assignment at the start of it. It's not an assessment, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Take the opportunity to find those pressure points and work on them. And in this case, okay, some of the thing was just because of the team, myself included, because how I interfaced with that. But the other stuff here is, okay, just set that expectation correctly, and you might be able to understand or go in with a better understanding of where you should be aiming, so that you don't have that much that you need to rescope, that you don't necessarily need to spend as much time working with the other members of the team on some of the stuff that they're meant to doing rather than your own work, just so that we can get as much done on the project. But again, learning experience, very useful, still early on in the year, still a lot of opportunity to improve. And that's all it's for. Anyway, I'll catch you around.